Welcome to the Baunfire podcast. I am your host, Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about my gaming showcase hopes and predictions, thoughts on PlayStation's state of play, CD Projekt's transparency, and much more. Before we get started, subscribe to the Baunfire on your favorite podcast app and leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, or subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, check out the link in the show description. I miss E3. I'm just saying it. I miss it. I miss E3. I hate having some dork, some Nepo baby claim that every single showcase is part of his thing, even though they're not. Kicking off Summer Game Fest with the PlayStation State of Play, there wasn't a single amount of Summer Game Fest branding on the State of Play. I miss E3. I was so fortunate in 2018 to go, and I just, my honest take is that actually being there kind of sucked. It was I'm not big into like huge crowds, and so the actual experience in the moment, I actually kind of hated, if I have to be honest. There was also a part of it where I was part of a group, and we were kind of being like shepherded around like sheep, and I didn't really love that. I understood why, so I think that definitely kind of threw the experience for me a little bit as well. But that said, there was something grand. Like, I remember I was part of a group with Ubisoft, so we just walked in, and there were like thousands of people waiting outside to get in, and we just walked in. That was cool. We had our Ubisoft shirts on, so like we looked cool, supposedly. And there was something about like going into one of the halls and seeing just all of the setups, and like that was the year like Nintendo was there. I think PlayStation had a booth, but I don't think they did like a showcase. And like this was like early Fortnite as well, and like Fortnite had a huge thing, and Xbox was there, and Ubisoft was there. I think I said Nintendo already. It was huge. It was everything was there, and it was just so cool. Just seeing everything was cool. And then so if you had never been or you didn't know, if I remember correctly, there were two big halls where all of the things were. And then connecting them was like a big long hallway in the LA Convention Center, a big long hallway, and then like a open area in the middle. And for me, it was cool because that's where the Division 2 had set up this laser etching thing where it was etching people's names into these big slabs that were going to be displayed in various studios that worked on the game, along with the statue of a Division agent. And what was really cool for me was for my name to be alongside a bunch of people you've actually heard of, right? So that was really neat. And then just being there was so cool. Getting to go to the Ubisoft show was legitimately a blast. Obviously seeing the Division 2 get revealed was sweet, but especially just, the Just Dance intro and all that was great. And I just miss that. I miss knowing that in that week there was going to be a showcase in the morning, in the afternoon, and then tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon. And for like 4 or 5 days straight, there was just going to be news, back-to-back hits. Everyone, Xbox, at one point revealed the Xbox One, and then PlayStation completely obliterated them, and honestly probably set the course for the future of console gaming, for better or worse. Like, there was just something about that week. And now it just feels so generic and disconnected. And like I kind of referenced, like Jeff Keighley's tried to be like, well, this is Summer Game Fest. And you can tell that like PlayStation and Xbox and Ubisoft are kind of like, I mean, we won't say that we aren't Summer Game Fest, but like we definitely aren't, right? And it's just, I think Xbox is like put like the logo on their thing, but it's not the same. We won't even have, we don't even know when the Nintendo show is yet. It just, it's not the same. And I know why E3 failed. I understand it. It was a long time coming, right? But it just, this time, I mean, I still refer to this time as E3, like the E3 time, the E3 window or whatever, because to me, that's what it's always going to be. It's never going to be Summer Game Fest or, Jeff 3 or whatever. It's always going to be E3 to me. And it's kind of like I'll never call it X. It's always going to be Twitter to me. It's one of those things that it just, the guy trying to take it over isn't legitimate in my opinion, and I'm keeping it the way it is and get off my lawn. So as we head into this showcase season, I just can't help but really miss E3. And F the ESA, that this is mostly their fault, because they didn't do the things they should have done, and they made everyone hate them for many reasons. But I miss E3, and I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, feel very lucky that I got to go to the second to last one, and arguably the last one for real. Because if you remember, 2019 was just like a fan show at that point. I think a lot of people, a lot of booths didn't even show up, and it was kind of a rough one. But long live E3. That's my final statement there. Let's get into the gaming news. So we're gonna start off with Xbox. Xbox announced a new deal with 100 Star, a new AAA dev, making their first game. This studio was founded by the Rocksteady founders, who left Rocksteady and decided to do their own thing. So my first thing is, I will say, just to make sure I'm consistent, I have consistently ripped on these type of devs. This whole thing, we've seen so much of it for the last 4 or 5 years, especially, of this new AAA indie dev making a AAA game as their first project, headed up by these 10 developers you've heard of or have heard of the studio they used to be at. And like most of them haven't done anything, at least not yet. Probably the most notable one that's actually released a game. The game was Callisto Protocol. It was from the guy who, of course, I can't remember his name, but who did Dead Space. And it was fine, but it was mostly a flop, to the point where he left the studio almost immediately after that game didn't do very well, and now they are desperately trying to cling to something. I think that studio is still technically open, but we'll see what they do without that big name heading them up. But this is interesting, the idea that these were the guys who were responsible for like the Arkham games. That is the type of game that I bet Xbox fans and Xbox would love to have. I'll be curious if this ends up being a brand new IP. I'll be curious if maybe they try to entice a license holder to let them attach a license to this game. I can't imagine WB would let them, like do an Arkham game or something. But we'll probably see something in a similar vein, maybe a Marvel property or something could be interesting. I mean, cool. Like, this is one of those things where I'm assuming it's going to be a deal, and we'll talk about this again in the next story, where it's going to be a third-party exclusive, and then eventually they'll probably allow it to be put onto other platforms. Xbox, I believe, is the publisher, so we will see what they do with that. They've been, and that could even already be part of the agreement, but we'll have to wait and see. The other similar story is that they also announced that they have a deal with Toys for Bob for their next game. It's widely assumed this is going to be a Spyro game. If you don't know, when Xbox acquired Activision Blizzard King, they got Toys for Bob, the developer of Spyro. I believe Crash as well. Toys for Bob decided to go indie and left Activision Blizzard King and is no longer part of the Xbox ecosystem. But you have to remember that Spyro and Crash and any of the properties Toys for Bob had, or Activision Blizzard King had, are now Xboxes. So it's kind of this weird situation where when Toys for Bob left, they were almost certainly working on a game. That game was probably Spyro. And in order to not waste that work, they were probably maybe nicely forced to have to work with Xbox to put the game out with them because Xbox owns the license. So I suspect this isn't a nasty thing. I'm sure this is a agreeable relationship between the dev and publisher. But it is interesting that there's definitely some deeper ties between these two parties, and I'll be curious. I saw some people today, and we'll talk more about the PlayStation State of Play pretty soon. But they showed off a new Astro Boy game, or Astrobot, or whatever, and I saw people being like, "Oh, well, Astrobot is coming, so Xbox decided to get a Spyro game or whatever." And it's like, no, like that's not how these things work. This rumor about Toys for Bob popped up as soon as they left ABK. As soon as they were gone, the rumors popped up that they were, even though they had left, were probably still going to have a deal with Xbox and publish their first game there. And it's, for the reasons I said before. So, yeah, I'll be curious about this. They said they're in early development, so this isn't a thing we should expect to see for 2 or 3 years at least. But it is cool that, they have these deals being inked. This is one of those things that, people should look for when there's all of this rumor and speculation. If you're somehow able to ignore that Xbox is currently Microsoft's most profitable division, if you're able to look past the leaked documents from the ABK acquisition that showed that I believe Xbox is in some financial capacities more valuable, like doing better than Nintendo, and almost as well as Sony in some of the kind of the brass tacks ways. Maybe not unit sales, but in other ways that probably matter more. Making these deals is Xbox playing ahead. So it would be weird if a platform was planning on going full third party, if they were signing exclusive deals on multiple games from multiple, at least somewhat high-end developers. Fallout 76 has hit 20 million downloads, with 3 million of those being just since the Fallout show came out. So that game is hitting its stride, which is really strange because I swear within the last year or two, there was like an update they did that was assumed to be their last big one. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I swore that at one point it was basically assumed that they were kind of done with 76. And now for whatever reason, it is kind of hitting again, and it's actually probably more popular than it's ever been. I still can't get into it. I tried to play it. I'll just stick with my Fallout 4 playthrough. I'm like halfway through and still, need to get back to. Same with 10 other games. But yeah, I mean, good for Fallout 76. I don't think there's any way to paint that as a bad thing unless you are looking for bad things. At least that's my opinion. Finally, Redfall has released its final patch. Arcane Austin and the devs who remain there were able to put out this patch that enabled an offline mode, I think fixed a bunch of stuff, added some content that I assume was mostly done anyways, and it's that game's kind of last hurrah, as well as that studio, Arcane Austin's last hurrah. Like I've said 100 times, I will never endorse or cheer for or try to justify layoffs or studio closures. That said, maybe being slightly hypocritical, the more we've delved into what was going on at Arcane Austin, even Tango Gameworks, it becomes harder and harder to argue that like they were about to turn the bend, right? Like that they were about to become sustainable studios. Again, you would hope that a big giant corporation like Microsoft wouldn't need to shut down studios over a few $1 million. But at the same time, when you understand how corporations are run and how their divisions are ran and how the individual players in those divisions are looked at, you got to have value. And unfortunately, I think that from a purely cold-hearted point of view, that those studios, especially Austin, that there probably just wasn't the manpower left, and the names weren't there anymore, and the future just looked probably kind of bleak for those studios, and so the sucky moves were made. So at the end of the day, I hope every one of those devs finds a good place to work extremely soon, to do even bigger and better things. Moving on to PlayStation, we had the State of Play. It was what appears to be the show or the showcase they're going to have for this summer. It was not a showcase. That tends to be their big like blockbuster shows where they show off the new God of War or whatever. So the State of Play, going into it, even as someone who's like not like a PlayStation person, I just assume that their State of Play shows are always going to be like pretty awful. For whatever reason, their own fans don't seem to realize that. So when this was one of the most boring, kind of pointless shows I've ever seen, I wasn't even mad. I was just like, yeah, that's pretty much what I expected. Like, that's kind of what they do. We can probably expect a showcase this fall when they reveal the PlayStation 5 Pro, as well as maybe some other longer term announcements. But yeah, so the big thing they opened with was Concord. It's this. It had this really elaborate cinematic that they showed that was basically just a ripoff of Guardians of the Galaxy. But it had these interesting characters. It was kind of cute and funny. And then when they finally open up and show off the game, it's an Overwatch clone. And so, yeah, I just, that is a brave genre to try to be getting into at this point. I find it hard to believe that hero shooter genre is currently growing. As popular as Overwatch once was, it just seems like a weird move to get into this now. So, good luck to them. I assume this was an inspired choice. So, I just don't think this is where it's at. The reaction doesn't seem all that excited. And unfortunately, that was probably supposed to be the highlight of the show. They showed off a bunch of other stuff, things that were like mostly kind of underwhelming, or multi-platform games, which was kind of strange. They did close the show with Astrobot. This is kind of a strange one. This was a really funny. I saw someone post that they're like, Astrobot sold, SOLD, sold 53 million copies with its last game. This one should be a huge hit for PlayStation. And I didn't really know much about it. And then I looked into it a little bit more, and I saw some of the replies to that person, pointing out that was a like couple hour long, if that, free, I believe came on the PlayStation either 3 or 4, I think 4, a free game that was like a little tech demo basically for like an hour or two. And they were counting the downloads. They called them sets. They said sold, so they were implying that it had sold, that they were able to sell 53 million copies of this game that's free and came on consoles, I believe, which was a weird way to try to frame this game. The indications are that this is a longer experience than the previous Astrobot games. I believe the last experience was actually a PSVR 1 experience, which people really did love. My impression is that this game is very much it's like a platformer, kind of cutesy game, but it's also like a celebration of Sony and PlayStation and all of that. And that's cool. The things I've seen really are neat. This trailer was great. I think it's going to be interesting. They've said that this game is huge. Well, when your previous games are, a couple hours long, does that mean it's like 5 hours long or 10 or 20? Like what do they mean by huge? I'll be really curious to what this sells for. If it's a full straight up $70 game, I'll be interested if that feels justified to people. If it ends up being less, that would probably make sense. It has been kind of funny to me through the last day or so since this show, when I saw a bunch of pretty notable game journalism coverage personalities being like, "This game of the year." It's like, oh my goodness. So this awful show happened, and you picked the one thing that was like okay in the showing, and it must be game of the year. So maybe it will be. Maybe it will be that great. That'd be cool. Like that wouldn't be a bad thing. I would like to see Sony, push more into the like Ratchet and Clank, Astrobot, kind of the not sad dad, depressing third person action adventure games to be their main thing. Seeing more of this would probably be a good thing for their fan base. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how they handle it. That was about it. I mean, it wasn't it was a weird show. It wasn't very exciting. I was pretty surprised. Even though I really wasn't like, again, like their state of plays are always kind of bad. And I went into it and left it being like, oh yeah, that's about what I thought it was going to be. Again, it's just strange that like the hardcore PlayStation fans were like losing their crap. I'm just like, guys, that's just what like these aren't great. Like they save their cool stuff for their showcases, and honestly, their showcases tend to suck, but they tend to have one or two like legitimately really really cool things, so no one cares. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Going back to that Neil Druckmann story from last week, so since they put out his kind of weird statements about AI and stuff, he came out and disputed their article and his answers in the article, saying that they didn't contain the full context. He posted exact full transcripts of what he said, and it was drastically different than what they put into their article. Sony took down the article and issued an apology, saying that they mischaracterized his words or some fluff excuse. So that obviously sucks. But when I was reading more into this, is I guess this is kind of a part of a bigger problem where I guess Sony in recent years has not completely cut off, but has made media contact with their like big higher ups in PlayStation, like the studio heads and stuff like that, have made them not as accessible to the media, and then instead has been doing stuff like this where they kind of do their own interviews, which is obviously not great because then they control the entire narrative, and yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, no one cares. People are going to be over it in a couple days, but if they aren't already. But definitely a really strange move for them. And man, it's just like what's so funny about Sony this year and really in recent years has been that, if they weren't so entrenched like they are in the game world, and if they didn't have these properties that really are some of the best games ever made, right? Man, they'd be screwed because they just seem completely incompetent when it comes to everything but making some really good single player games and some pretty good hardware. Like, man, crazy, but they'll keep getting away with it. And then finally, a little itty bitty story here. The PSVR 2 is getting a PC adapter. This was shown in some documents, I believe, from South Korea, but there's no more info about it yet. There is a lot of concern that this adapter thing may only allow you to like stream games, which would suck, or that it may do the whole like require PC login thing, which we've discovered that PC gamers aren't a big fan of. So we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. The PSVR 2 seems like it's extremely good hardware. It just isn't supported well. And being locked onto the PlayStation and not being able to use other VR platforms kind of kills it. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I didn't have any Nintendo news of note yet. I'm sure we'll have some of that soon. So moving on to other gaming news, we have the gaming showcase predictions and hopes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the showcases coming up. The first thing I want to talk about is a poll I put up in a few places asking people what their most anticipated show was. I got around 300 responses, which is fine. I would always prefer to have like over 1,000 to have like significant results, but I'll take it. Leading the pack with 46% of the vote was Xbox. In second place with 28% was Summer Game Fest. PlayStation at 16% and Ubisoft at 10. The Summer Game Fest Xbox split surprised me. This is probably more reflective of my audience, the people who follow me, more than anything. But it is still like, there are people who are excited about Xbox. So I think that's a good thing. I'm kind of surprised about the Ubisoft number because if you think about the things they could show off this year, they could end up having like the best show. I think last year they did have the second best show. I think Xbox showed extremely well last year. I think Ubisoft was right behind them, where I think PlayStation and especially Summer Game Fest had extremely mediocre showings last year. So we'll have to see how that pans out this year. PlayStation not really coming out super hot with that. For Summer Game Fest, the things we're expecting or I'm kind of hoping for, Dragon Age Dreadwolf release date and gameplay. I think that's pretty much a lock from all the rumors. There's been some rumors kicking around that maybe Xbox purchased the marketing rights to Dragon Age, so we could see it there instead. I don't think so, though. I think it's going to be Summer Game Fest. For PlayStation, I think we may actually end up getting more interesting news at Summer Game Fest about PlayStation because there's rumors going around that they could show off the Spider-Man 2 DLC at Summer Game Fest. That would be kind of funny, but we'll see. It's anticipated that we may get some announcements of Resident Evil remakes, including what I believe it's Zero and Code Veronica. So we'll have to see if that happens. And then we just found out, and maybe we'll see a tease of it here, that 2K, the game dev under 2K, has potentially gotten the FIFA rights or a license for FIFA to make a soccer sports game. It would be very interesting for, I guess, FC football or whatever they call it now at EA to have direct competition. I know that there is another fairly popular game out there, but I believe they've gone like free to play and everyone hates it now because it's like a live service game. So, maybe 2K shows up at SGF. SGF is a hard one to predict because he's going to have people from so many different angles come in. So we'll just have to see what comes of that. For the Xbox showcase a couple days later, there's a lot of anticipation that we'll see games that were previously announced actually show up, maybe have gameplay. So games like Perfect Dark, State of Decay 3. We could even have Outer Worlds 2, I think, is a possibility. We'll have to wait and see. It's pretty much assumed we're going to get Indiana Jones gameplay, and we'll almost certainly get an announcement or a teaser or something for Gears of War 6. And I think that would be a pretty big boon for Xbox. I think, because honestly, Gears of War 6 is probably their next big like legacy title that could kind of right the ship a little bit for them. I don't think we'll see, obviously not a Halo before that. I really think that Gear 6 is probably the next like big thing. So I hope we do see it. And then for Assassin's Creed, we'll almost certainly get some Shadows gameplay. The Division 2 Year 6, for any of my fans of that game, we're supposed to be getting a tease of that or some kind of info about that coming up. Star Wars Outlaws gameplay is pretty much a lock. That game comes out here in just a couple months, so I think that we'll start seeing a lot more about that. We just got like an accessibility showcase for that game, so they're wrapping things up over there. That Splinter Cell remake, I think, could definitely show up here finally. And then finally, the Ghost Recon, whatever next is coming for that franchise. It's been a decent number of years since Breakpoint now. And they did wrap up development of Breakpoint fairly recently. So I'm expecting to see something from that. Moving on to the other news this week, we had No Man's Sky is getting another big update. It's called the Adrift expansion, and it looks like it's going to take place in another universe, and it's going to have kind of like a, I don't know if it's like a roguelite or if it's kind of like a survival mechanic to it. But as always, super cool. I may even download it and play it for an hour or two and then feel completely lost and run away. We'll have to wait and see. But still, like, that game, just the best supported game ever. I've seen people try to be like, oh, it's Cyberpunk and blah. No, nope. Cyberpunk is still a empty facade mess. It's a great game, but the thing with No Man's Sky is that it promised big, it didn't reach those promises, and then it has surpassed every imaginable thing that game could have ever been, and then some, and it's all been free. You can't tell me that's what happened with Cyberpunk. You just can't. That game promised everything, gave almost none of it, and then basically after 3 years got the game into a release state and released a solid DLC. But it's just, you can't even compare them, at least not in my opinion. So good for them, good for those fans, good for that player base. But we know that studio is working finally on a new project, where he's off promising big things again. So we'll have to see what happens. Speaking of Cyberpunk, CD Projekt, the CD Projekt Red's, owner or higher up, they put out a really interesting chart, breaking down all of their projects and how many devs are working on them. This is in comparison to a chart they put out back in like January to kind of show, where their priorities are. I have no love lost for CD Projekt or CD Projekt Red. I don't buy the whole redemption story of Cyberpunk still, but this kind of thing is really cool, and this is smart. So they have the chart of all their devs. So they have 407 devs working on Polaris, which is the next Witcher game. They have 56 devs working on Orion, which is the next Cyberpunk. They have 39 devs working on another Witcher game it's the Sirius code name. I believe that's supposed to be a multiplayer game, but I could be wrong. And then they have 20 devs working on a new IP. So we'll see what that means. It could just be another game, another Cyberpunk game or something. Or maybe they legitimately are going to a whole new IP. And I think that'd be cool if they are. And they noted that there's 0 devs working on Cyberpunk 2077. That game has concluded its development cycle. So, good for them. That's cool. I'm glad they got it out the door finally. And hopefully the next one, either they more accurately promise or they actually deliver this time. We'll see. Speaking before about Resident Evil, rumors are that the 9th game in that series has been pushed back to late 2025 or early 2026. And there's the rumors that we could even see this at Summer Game Fest, that they're in the middle of development of both remakes for Resident Evil 0, which I believe is a prequel to the first game. Which makes sense. And then Code Veronica, which is a pretty beloved game. I never played it. I was getting into gaming around this time frame, but I never played that game. But I've heard a lot of people say a lot of really good things about it. So that seems like it would be a pretty popular decision. The Alan Wake 2 DLC has been hinted by a change of profile picture by the Remedy Twitter account. So we'll have to see if anything comes of that. That, again, could definitely be a Summer Game Fest announcement, which wouldn't surprise me at all. I actually never finished Alan Wake 2. I believe I'm almost done, and I got through one of the characters' whole stories, and I started into the other one, and I just stopped. I'm good. I think that game's amazing, but I'm good. I just lost the interest in it, and so kind of a weird thing for me. But it's kind of become a pattern as well. So we'll see if anything evolves with that. There was an interesting story around GDC where the Playdate company, this is a company that makes, I believe it's those little kind of retro style handhelds, had 4 pallets, I believe, of product that just went missing. They were able to recover 2 of them, so that was about $200,000 worth, but they never found the other two pallets. And then here in this last week, a situation came up where the rest of the Playdate boxes were found on the sidewalk and parking lot of a restaurant. And so they were able to recover them, and as far as they could tell, they got everything back. It was an interesting story because the people making it were saying that because of the nature of the loss, that their insurance almost certainly was not going to cover it. So now they have the product back and they can actually try to make money on it. And they're even considering branding all of these as a special edition. I think they said like a hot edition because they were stolen. So kind of a fun story, kind of interesting. We found out that XDefiant hit 7.6 million unique users and players since its release. I mean, that's cool. I think that game is one of the worst experiences I've ever had in a multiplayer video game. It just feels like generic mobile game trash. But a lot of people have played it, so hopefully they continue to. I bet they won't. That's my guess. Discord is refocusing on gaming. I think the COVID times kind of made Discord think like, hey, we could be like Enterprise, right? There is something to that. One of the interesting stories coming out of the Ukraine war was that at least in the early war, they were using encrypted Discord rooms to coordinate like attacks and like significant actions, even using the video capability of commanders in the back lines being able to watch live footage from like cameras and stuff on the soldiers of what was going on during various actions. So it seems like they did delve into that a bit, but it looks like this big investment they're making now, almost all of it's going to go into optimizing the service for gamers again, finding that the majority of their users were only operating in groups of 5 to 15 people. I mean, that reflects my own Discord where there's about 5 to 10 people who talk fairly often, and then there's like 100 other people in the server. That seems about right. So I'm curious to how this works. Discord has been pushing monetization hard lately. So I'm curious if maybe they had dipped their foot in a little too deep to some other things, and it's nice to see them getting back to their roots. The final thing I have, maybe two things. One, Manor Lords had their big update finally hit Game Pass, so I'm extremely excited to check that out. It looks like it had some like really big changes that will make that game, especially like the end game, more interesting. And then Unicorn Overlord. So for as much crap as I give Discord member Pizza Morgue about various things when we have our little spats, them turning me on to Unicorn Overlord has been a really cool experience. So it's not even a turn-based combat. It's just like a strategy game that's these little anime people, and it's literally everything about it is not my style. I don't like, so like what I've said about Baldur's Gate 3. I don't like high fantasy, even though this isn't too out there. I just don't like these kind of games, and I played the 6-hour demo, ate it up, bought the game, and I've played quite a bit more since I bought it. Just a warning, this is a very provocative game. I wouldn't say it's like lewd, or at least not anything I've seen so far. It's not like over the top, but the character designs and their animations are very sexual is what I would how I would describe them. It's pretty cool, and I'm pretty sure you can marry people in it, and I have fallen in love with like 5 different characters, so that's where I'm at. But yeah, great game. If you haven't played it, if you're willing, that demo is a great opportunity. It's only on consoles, but definitely Unicorn Overlord, play the 6-hour demo. If you're into it, pay for it. I think it's not 70, it's like $45, I think. I think it's on sale on Xbox. Awesome, lots of fun, sucked me in, really cool. So that's all I have for this episode. So obviously next week will be I'll record kind of in the middle of the showcases, so I think next week I'll be able to talk about Summer Game Fest if I record that evening. We'll see, I'm not sure yet. But but the following week will probably be the bigger like recap of all the showcases. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please consider supporting all of my content by watching, listening, sharing, following my socials, or throwing a few bucks my way. And one of the ways you can do that, in the link in the description of the show, you can see how to support if you want to. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire podcast. So until next time.